The first week's readings are on Camp Obama, one-on-ones, and what is organizing. Camp Obama. This is an article from the Huntington Post that has an embedded interview with Marshall Ganz, and it really talks about how Obama's political campaign was built on the models of civil rights, labor organizing. And it's about the fact that Marshall Ganz was brought in to design Obama's campaign for getting out there and getting out the vote. And you'll see that Marshall Ganz worked for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. That was a very important group that was organized during the civil rights times in the 1960s. And in fact, we'll be reading about later in the semester about Ella Baker, who started the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. When SNCC became mature and decided that it really wanted to be a black-led, black-based group, Marshall Ganz went home to Bakersfield, and he said that he saw Bakersfield with Mississippi eyes. And he realized when he looked around him, he saw that farm workers, and they reminded him of the sharecroppers that he had met in Mississippi. And so he started working with the UFW and Cesar Chavez. He became the organizing director of the farm workers and was part of the executive board. And he also worked on Bobby Kennedy's campaign, who was very close or very interested in the farm workers. And he, as disciple of Marshall Gantz's, worked on the Howard Dean campaign as well. So take a look at this article. It's really interesting, and I've put a number of links at the end of this PowerPoint to tell you about some other Marshall Ganz videos. We'll be reading a number of Gantz's articles that he's designed for his organizing class at Harvard. The next article is Building Block of Organizing the One-on-Ones, and this is a short article by SImmons, and it describes what is a one-on-one. And this is the idea about this is that the basic part of organizing is meeting people and talking to people. And we do this every day, but we don't often think about consciously how we're approaching this. So SImmons defines a one-on-one as a means of working with people to find common values and commit to mutual support. It's a public relationship, a time to learn about mutual interests, common interests, an intentional part of a strategy of an organizer, and it ends with some commitments. Sometimes it doesn't end with a commitment, in which case it was a one-on-one that didn't really lead to a longer lasting relationship. Sometimes it doesn't end with a commitment, but it's a relationship that you might take up later. And you know, one-on-ones can be with friends that we already have, acquaintances, and they can also be with people that we seek out and meet for the first time. But the idea behind the one-on-ones is that you're trying to build an organization, you're building community. What one-on-ones are not. They are not about building intimacy, they're not prying or gossipy, and they're not without a goal. So are one-on-ones manipulative? And this is an interesting question. Here we see a picture of Barack Obama with a potential voter in Chicago back in the day when he was a community organizer for an Alinsky-based organization, and this is the community organizing we'll read more about. But the question here is, how do you carry out one-on-ones respectfully? And I was thinking about, you know, examples in my own experience of organizing, and one just popped into my mind. When I was a graduate student, a friend of mine was a foreign student from Spain, and my department or my school made a rule that foreign students could not get our department scholarships, and I thought this was outrageous. And you know, I knew my fellow students somewhat. This was my first year as a graduate student. And so I went around to each one of them, and I'd written up a petition, and I remember, going up to one of them and saying, "Here, sign this." And I remember hearing later that this student really resented the way I had approached him. And in fact, this would have been a good time to have a one-to-one where before I asked him to sign the petition, which would have been my goal, or a commitment, I could have sat down and said, how do you feel about the way scholarships are given out? Do you think it's fair that a foreign student is denied the ability to, get financial aid or get a scholarship just purely because of where they come from? And find out how they felt, before I threw the petition in their face. But, a lot of times we feel righteous about what we're doing, and we assume that everybody feels the same way we do, and just jump in there. And it's really good to start to think about, when we're reading this, when you read this one-on-ones, to think about how we approach people, and then also think about when we have goals to try to, encourage people to get involved. The steps that we take to find out who they are, what they're interested in, and what mutual interests we have, so that, there's some transparency of what you're interested in, and you find out if this is a person who shares your values. And in fact, this is what, things come down to, is that organizing, as we're talking about it, is about building on shared values. And that leads us to our next reading, What is Organizing by Marshall Ganz. And this is a short article. It's 2 pages, and if you look at it, you might think, oh, this is obvious. I know everything here. But take the time to actually read it, because it's a concentrated definition with a chart to illustrate the concepts. And the ideas that Ganz is outlining here is that organizers identify, recruit, and develop leadership. They build community around leadership and build power out of community. And relationships that empower and develop leadership are the key. So we want to think about how we're approaching our work, and how important that is. And again, this idea that it's based on our core values, our moral values, our caring about social change and justice, and finding those core values in the people that we meet, and then looking at our interests, finding out what particular ways that person that we're talking to has concerns, and building that into how we can work together, and how the work that we do together can really try to reach our common interests. 2 YouTubes for Marshall Ganz on leadership are listed here. Again, they go back to the Obama campaign, and they connect these ideas of values and recruiting, working with people, empowerment and leadership, and achieving goals. Empowering through responsibility and a commitment to act, not just to talk. So I hope you find these readings enjoyable. They're short, but I think they're all very provocative.